This is our last lesson for the chapter, and in this one we're going to describe the end behavior, which is a review of what we did in the last lesson, and then we're going to add in calculating the max and min and rounding to the nearest tenth, and then writing the intervals of increasing and decreasing. So the directions that I have for you here kind of spell out everything that you need to do on your homework, quizzes, tests. You need to be able to describe the end behavior, you need to be able to find relative max and min, and you need to be able to write your intervals of increasing and decreasing. So you can do the end behavior before you ever even graph this. So since this is negative and odd, that means it rises left and falls right. So that's my end behavior. Rises left, falls right. If you don't remember how to do this, you probably need to go back to the lesson right before this one where we talked about end behavior. So the next thing I'm going to do is go ahead and start by drawing my number line, because I'm going to fill that out as I go. So just draw in a number line. It can be any length. To the left, I'm going to label it as negative infinity, and to the right, I'm going to label it as positive infinity. I need to divide this up into 3 sections. I know how many sections I need based on whatever my largest exponent is. So since my exponent is 3, I need to have 3 sections. In order to get 3 sections, I need to add 1 less than that for tick marks. So 3 means that I'm going to put in 2 tick marks. So by putting in 2 tick marks, that gives me 3 sections on my line. So now I'm ready to go ahead and put this in my graphing calculator and calculate the max and the min. So when you type that in and graph it, it should look something like this. You should be able to check your end behavior based on looking at it. It should rise when it goes to the left. So if I'm looking at the left side, it goes up, falls to the right. So when I look at the right side, it goes down. So that part is correct. This part, I'm going to describe kind of what's happening as I read it from the left to the right. So if I look at the left, I have to go down, then I go back up, and then I go back down. Each one of these tick marks represents a place where it's changing direction. So I'm going to add above my number line the arrows that show what the graph is doing. So from here to here, it's going down. Then it turns around and goes back up, and then it starts to go back down. So my next step is to calculate the max and the min. So the first thing it gets to as it goes from left to right is a min. So I'm going to calculate this point first. If you don't know how to do that on your graphing calculator, you need to watch the video right before this where it talks about how to use your graphing calculator to find these. So when I put this one in my calculator, I get 0, -4. So this value is at 0, -4. Now this number line is my x-axis. So that point is 0. So my first tick mark, the first place where it changes direction, happens at 0. We're only using the x values because this is a horizontal line, just like the x-axis. So then as I continue on, my next point is going to be a max. So as I calculate that, that happens at the point 2, 0. So I'm going to put a 2 at this tick mark. Remember, we're only using the x value. And then in this particular graph, I don't have any more max or mins. If you didn't have any at all, you can write none or NA. If you had more, then you would just continue to add them to the list. So next, intervals of increasing and decreasing. So the intervals of increasing is going to be everywhere where your arrow is pointing up. So in this case, I only have 1 up arrow, and it's between 0 and 2. So my first interval is going to be 0, 2. This is called interval notation, and it says that it is increasing from 0 until it gets to 2. So now for my intervals of decreasing, it's everywhere where there's a down arrow. So the first one is from negative infinity to 0. So I'm going to put that one in. Negative infinity to 0. And then my next one is from 2 to positive infinity. And that's everything you need to do for this first problem. So now we're going to go ahead and try another one. We can start with the in behavior before we ever do anything. It's positive and it's even. So that means it rises left and it rises right. So go ahead and write that in. Next, I'm going to go ahead and put in my number line. Oops. Straighten that out a little. To the left is negative infinity. To the right is positive infinity. I know I need 4 sections, so I'm going to put in 3 tick marks. I can go ahead and graph it on my graphing calculator. This will let me verify my end behavior. So it does rise both to the left and to the right, so that's good. Next, I can calculate my max and my mins as I go from left to right. I can go ahead and put in my arrows if I want. So going from left to right, it goes down, then up, then down, then up. So I'm going to put that in. Down, then up, and down, and up. The first one I get to is a min, so I'm going to calculate that on my graphing calculator. So that's at negative 1.1, comma 1.0. Those are rounded to the nearest tenth. So that's this point right here. Negative 1.1, up 1.0. So I'm using just the x value, and I get negative 1.1. So my first change of direction happens when x is negative 1.1. Then the next point is a max. So I calculate that on my calculator, and I get that my max is at 0, 3. So that means this point right here is going to be 0. I'm using my x value. Then I go on to the next one, and that's a min. So I'm going to add a new one. This one happens at 1.8, comma, negative 5.3. Using the x value to label this tick mark, 1.8. Now I'm ready for my intervals of increasing and decreasing. Increasing is all of the up arrows. My first one is between negative 1.1 and 0. Negative 1.1 to 0. I also have an up arrow from 1.8 to positive infinity. Oops. Then my decreasing is my down arrow, so that's negative infinity to negative 1.1. And then I have another decreasing from 0 to 1.8. And then this problem would be done. So on this problem, I want you to go ahead and pause it, do the whole problem, and then do it again. Alright, so the first thing we are going to do is the end behavior. Hopefully you got that this one falls left and rises right. Then you put in your number line. So this was negative infinity and positive infinity. We need 5 sections, so that's 4 tick marks. We go ahead and graph it. It does fall to the left, rise to the right. As we read it from left to right, it starts going up, then down, then up, then down, and then up again. Our first point that we get to, the first change of direction, is a max. So I calculate that. I was at negative 1.5, comma, negative 1.6. Every time you write one of these down, you should look and see if that point actually makes sense. Make sure it is left 1.5, down 1.6. This point should be labeled as negative 1.5. Then as we move to the next point, remember we're reading it left to right, it would be this point right here, which would be a min. That one is at negative 0.5, comma, negative 4.0. This point we'll label as negative 0.5. Then our next point is going to be a relative max. That point happens at 0.5, comma, negative 2.0. So I'm labeling this point as 0.5. And then finally the last one is a relative min. That one is at 1.5, comma, negative 4.4. So I'm labeling this tick mark as 1.5. The last step is to put in my increasing and decreasing. My first increasing is from negative infinity to negative 1.5. My next one is from negative 0.5 to positive 0.5. And then my last one is from 1.5 to positive infinity. Then my decreasing is all the down arrows, so negative 1.5 to negative 0.5 and 0.5 to 1.5. So if you got all of this correct, then you are now ready to go ahead and do the homework off to the right.